Hello guys, and welcome back to another Eternal Top Decks video series here on my channel. Today we're gonna talk about Stonescar Jito, or Jito Queen, or whatever you want to call it. So let's dive right into the deck. The deck is basically a super low to the ground swarm aggro deck that tries to just flood the board with small units that gain charge from Frontier Jito, which grants charge to all your 1 casting cost or less units, which is most of the deck, and then eventually finish the opponent off with a Bandit Queen, making your entire board like twice the size basically for most of your units, and then just swinging for the victory. Alright, so let's talk about the card choices. I mean, for Frontier Jito is pretty self-explanatory. It's one of the namesakes of the deck, and the cards that make this deck so explosive and reward you for playing so many 1 power units. There's a couple of things to note on Jito. Basically, a lot of the time I think by now that it's wrong to play it on turn 1 unless you're on the draw and know your opponent plays an archetype that is very unlikely to silence or remove it from the board before your second turn. Otherwise, I think it's better to just play a regular 1-drop on turn 1 and play Jito plus another 1-drop on 2 to guarantee more damage, because all you're giving up is 1 damage in exchange for making sure that your turn 2 play actually has charge, which is often a lot more valuable, especially if you have a lurking Sanguar in your hand that you want to turn on. Since even if they have something like a torch on turn 2, they cannot torch the Jito before you have attacked and therefore given your other 1-drop on turn 2 charge. So that's something that I found the more I played the deck, that every time I played Jito turn 1 for that 1 extra damage and got it killed or silenced, I kind of felt like an idiot, so I just stopped doing it. I think it's not worth the 1 damage, because the explosiveness you gain from the guaranteed charge on turn 2 is so much more valuable, and sometimes also offsets the opponent's curve by holding back removal for Jito, or makes them incapable of actually dealing with Jito because they used their torch or whatever on your actual turn 1 play, like a Oni Ronin, an Oni Ronin, for example. So yeah, next card is Grenadin drone. Great card. Basically 2 bodies for 1, both get charged from Jito. If you play this on turn 1 and get to attack on an empty board on turn 2, this single-handedly enables lurking Sanguar on 2, which is great. And yeah, it's just good synergy with Queen and floods your board nicely, and it's also really good against removal because they have to usually use 2 removal to kill the entire card, and that usually costs them 2 cards and a lot more power than Grenadin drone costs, which makes it really good against reactive decks like control decks, because they basically need Lightning Storm. Otherwise they have no like good way to deal with a Grenadin drone. The only shadow 1-drop in the deck is Knifejack, just because it's very efficient. 2/2 for 1 power is a great rate, and the 2 damage to ourselves usually don't matter much because we are basically the aggro deck in every matchup, even against other aggro decks like Recano. So dealing 2 to us does not matter that much, because by the time they can actually like pressure us most of the time, we already lost the game anyway, and 2 life more or less don't matter then, because if we are racing, we're usually better at racing and win races most of the time. Against Recano it can rarely matter, but all in all this is just a 2/2 for 1 with no real drawback outside of like the mirror match. Then we have Oni Ronin. We all know one of the prime or the prime 1-drop in the entire game. 2/1 Warcry for 1, great stats. Warcry makes sure that even if this trades with like a Temple Scribe or whatever, we get 2/3 of its stats back on top of our library of our deck on the next unit we draw. And if it gets to attack more than once, it's gonna add up really quickly and snowball into some really nice advantage, and all that for like a 1 power 2 attack unit. And the last 1-drop in the deck is Pyronite, just another good 2 power 1-drop. The Overwhelm has nice synergy with Queen and where is it? Rapid Shot, because if they block it and you Rapid Shot, a lot of the time you waste 2, 3, sometimes even 4 damage. With Pyronite you waste nothing. Everything extra goes to the opponent, which is great in an aggressive deck like this. And if we ever end up in a game that goes long enough for us to have 6 power in play and we have neither lost nor won the game yet, activating the ultimate for this card can do a lot in helping us win that yet undecided game. So that's another nice protection in case we flat out in a longer drawn out game where the opponent actually like gets to trade a lot with us without actually pulling ahead, but slowing us down enough that we are not winning either. And then drawing extra power can be really punishing, but Pyronite can make up for that. Because we kind of want 4 anyway for Queen, so the 5th is kind of blank and the 6th turns into a +4/+4 weapon for our Pyronite, which is pretty good. Yeah, Rapid Shot is just Stonescar's Finest Hour, which is basically better than Finest Hour on offense, but a lot worse on defense and useless against damage-based removal like Lightning Storm and Torch, where Finest Hour actually can save a guy. This can't, so it's like an offensive-only card, which is totally fine in a deck that basically only cares about offense, and it's super efficient. +4 and Quick Draw is about as good as +4/+4 would be on offense. So it's basically 33.33% more stats if all we care is offense compared to Finest Hour, which is really powerful. Next we have Suffocate. I recently figured out like how good the card is in this specific deck and how important it also is, in my opinion, to the deck's success. Because first of all, it kills a lot of units that are way more expensive than it, which means huge tempo swings. There's very, very few units that cost 3 or less that this can't kill. Like the only 2 I can think of are Dawnwalker, which doesn't matter anyway and trades with everything we does and is terrible against our deck. And the other one that sees a lot of play is an enhanced Champion of Chaos. Sure, there's stuff like False Prince, but first of all we have other ways to turn False Prince into a frog or just torch it, and it's also not a very much played card. So Suffocate basically kills everything we care about. It kills all the good multi-faction early Combre units. It kills all the Feln units out of Feln midrange and control decks, outside of maybe Champion of Cunning that not everyone runs. And yeah, it just kills all the random units that don't matter that much but still block and potentially trade, or even block without trading against our units. So removing any 2+ power cost unit is a huge gain in tempo and damage, because the unit can't block, so our unit deals the damage to the opponent, and we invest half the power or 1/3 of the power the opponent invested to play the card. Like if you ever Suffocate like a Seraph or a Combre healer against Combre, that's such a huge blowout. Then we have Torch, just one of the best cards in the game and the best fire card in the game. Super efficient and versatile removal that can also remove our opponent if they are at 3 life, which is pretty nice to finish close games when the opponent is about to stabilize and we can't deal the last 3 damage in combat anymore. And last but not least, instead of the 4 Suffocate, I decided to run 1 Annihilate, because past a certain point, if you draw too many Suffocates, you might run out of good Suffocate targets, and Annihilate is a bit more flexible, and sometimes it actually matters that you might want to kill that impending Doom or Titan or whatever, but most of the time it's better to just very efficiently and cheaply kill units before they play Titan, so that if they play Titan, they either are so far behind that Titan doesn't help enough and they lose just with the turn 4 Titan. You can basically just beat them through the Titan because you're too far ahead on the board. Or the other case, they have the Titan, but we have enough attackers that take down a Titan with Rapid Shot, and we still have our Rapid Shot because we didn't need to waste it on a 2-drop, since we could kill that with Suffocate, and then we can have a 1-mana answer to a Titan, basically. Regarding the 1-drops, real quick, there's no beetles, because I don't want to really run more than 21 drops, because past a certain point you end up wasting power. Like, it's not that efficient if you have 2 spare power and the card you play costs 1 and you end up wasting that 1 power because you have nothing else to do with that 1 power. So you are better off playing a slightly more expensive, more powerful unit that gets you more stats and value for the invested power, because like on turn 3, for example, you often won't be able to play like 3 1-drops, but you might have 2 units left. So if you have a 2 and a 1, you get much better stats for the power you have available. And if all you have is 2 1s and either no target for one of your 1-mana spells or no 1-mana spell, you might just end up wasting that power, which is why 21 drops seems like a good number. Also, Beetle is not very powerful. The 1 attack makes it easily blocked, and it's not that easy all the time to set it up, and there's other 1 drops that you kind of want to play earlier on over Beetle, because they hit harder, like Ronin and the 2-power 1 drops that deal a lot more damage the earlier you play them and stuff. Sure, if Beetle connects, the 2-power evasion can be really nice, especially if the ground is gummed up a bit, but usually we are the ones flooding the ground and gumming up the board, so we should most of the time be able against unit heavy decks to just push into their blockers and punish them for blocking or remove their blockers enough that having 1 unit with evasion wouldn't make the difference, because we still have enough ground guys that gonna run into blockers anyway. So the upsides of the flying are kind of slim and very situational, and it's also not that easy to turn on. So it's the weakest 1-drop. It's the 1-drop that I would play if I would want more than the 20 that I'm having, but I think the 20 that I'm having are the correct number, which brings me to the card that I'm running over more 1-drops, Argenport Instigator. The card is just way too good, way too efficient. The 3/3 for 2 already is great. It has no synergy with Jito, but that doesn't matter as much, because it has kind of pseudo charge anyway with its ability, because the opponent has to block against us, and if they block a lot of the time, things trade, and if things trade, the damage we take, once again, doesn't matter as much, but every damage they take, even though they blocked, matters a lot, because it makes blocking a lot less efficient. There's also the thing that I explained with the power efficiency use and stuff, and basically playing a turn 2 Instigator and having an Instigator in play on turn 3 as your only attacker makes it much easier and much more likely to still get out your Sanguar for free, because all you basically need to do is kill their probably one blocker that they have at the time, because they probably spent one turn killing our 1-drop, then we play an Instigator, then they play a blocker, we kill the blocker and attack, and that triggers our Sanguar. At least I think that's how it works. Now that I think about it, I think I didn't get into that situation yet. I mean, the trigger from Instigator definitely counts as damage from a unit to the opponent. I am just not 100% sure, given how Sanguar is worded, whether the damage has to come from 2 different units or just damage from a unit twice. But I think it should be, because that also would mean that there are situations where you have an Instigator in play and 2 removal, you kill 2 opposing units, play your Sanguar pre-combat, and if you have a Jito, because it has 0 cost for the turn, it will get charged from the Jito, and you can charge with a free Sanguar on turn 3. That's like living the dream. But yeah, all in all, either way, even if what I just said I think should work, wouldn't work, it still makes enabling Sanguar a lot easier, because if the opponent has the option of blocking and taking damage by trading, or not blocking and taking damage, that makes Sanguar basically a guaranteed play, which is very important, because it's another huge tempo swing in the game, in the deck, and yeah, pushes the opponent further with the back to the wall. No other 2-drops, because they are all a lot worse than this, and this is the only one that is so good that even though it does not get charged from Jito, it's worth playing. Next we have the 3-drops. I found, after trying a couple of things, that this is by far the best 3-drop for the deck. Alternatives include Shogun's Scepter, Shadowlands Guide, and good old Champion of Chaos. Champion of Chaos, while a really great card, has a few problems. It does not synergize really well with the deck. It gets no charge from Jito. It does not help us go wide more, therefore gets less stat boni from Queen. Is a lot more susceptible to removal. Granted, there's not that much good removal that answers Champion, but there is a lot of Vanquish around, and Vanquish is basically dead against the deck, aside from killing a Sanguar, which costs us 0 mana, 0 power, so they still invest 2 power in a card to trade with one of our cards that we invested 0 power to play, and also they have to have the Vanquish right away to deal with the Sanguar, because otherwise they have to trade with it in combat or torture it, because they can't afford to just take 4 damage from the Sanguar if they can avoid it. So if they draw their Vanquish after they had to deal with the Sanguar right away, it's gonna be dead. So there's a lot of scenarios where even if we draw a Sanguar and they draw a Vanquish, they draw it too late. And even if they don't draw it too late, we gain 2 power of tempo from them vanquishing our Sanguar, while vanquishing Champion of Chaos gains them 1 power in tempo, because they spend 2 power to kill our 3 power play. The other thing is, this is a lot better against control decks after a Lightning Storm or Harsh Rule, because it's 3 bodies that they need to spend 3 removal on, because they have few to no units, and the few units they have we might be able to kill so they can't block, which makes this a pain for decks relying on removal. That also counts obviously for other decks, and say for example we have a Champion of Chaos, they can Death Strike it. Sure, it's -1 power in tempo for them, but it's still better than having Death Strike and facing an assembly line. So assembly line just goes a lot better with the whole flooding and just shoving into their blockers, into their few blockers plan, and with Bandit Queen and everything, and also making the opponent's removal either tempo negative or even card economy negative, because they have to spend removal on half a card, 1/3 of a card, or if they spend it on one card, they usually have to pay twice or 3 times the power cost to kill the unit. So we don't really want good removal targets that allow the opponent to gain back tempo with removal that is cheaper than the things they're targeting. The other 2-3 power cards is 1 rally, basically as the 5th Bandit Queen. I had 2 for a while, but the card is often kind of a win more or situational. If they kill a lot of our units, I rather have something like a Shadowlands guide than a rally. Same if they have sweepers, so it's only kind of good against decks with a medium amount of blockers and little removal, and even against those decks something like a Shadowlands guide is not that much worse than a rally in a lot of situations. In some situations it will be, which is why I went for 1/1 split. Shadowlands guide is just a more versatile and powerful card, but yeah, in some cases you just want that Bandit Queen type effect that just blows them out of the water before they stabilize, which is why I decided I at least want a 5th Bandit Queen, even though it's a lot worse than Bandit Queen, because, like I said, even if you're low on units, Bandit Queen is still a unit itself, herself, and pretty good, while Rally isn't. So drawing 2 rallies in almost every game is gonna be terrible. Good way to avoid it is just only putting 1 in the deck, given that the card is already pretty situational and a bit underpowered anyway. And yeah, if I could find 1 more slot, I wouldn't mind playing like 1 more Shadowlands guide, for example, because it is still pretty efficient. Comparing this to Shogun's Scepter is a bit more powerful, but the problem with Shogun's Scepter is it once again gets punished by removal and by blocking, because it only generates 1 actual extra body and makes one of our existing bodies better, but usually not to a point where the opponent does not still have 1 unit that either trades with it, or even in case of stuff like a Titan, can block it without trading. So it makes it a lot easier for the opponent to have a critical mass of blockers, while Shadowlands Guide adds 2 actual attackers to the board, even though 1 without charge. And it also can get us back a Lurking Sanguar post-combat, which is important to keep in mind, because post-combat, even in the Void, Sanguar becomes a 0 cost 4/2, so Shadowlands Guide can return it to play. That also counts, obviously, pre-combat, if you somehow manage to deal enough damage with Instigator to the opponent to turn Sanguar into a 0 cost unit. And yeah, that's why Shadowlands Guide is better than Scepter, at least in that deck. Scepter has its uses and is pretty powerful, but I think not in this deck. It's probably better in a more medium-sized aggro deck with beefier, better units to put it on that get more significant stat increases from it, and yeah, I actually get harder to trade with in combat and stuff. And the deck also benefits more from Warcry, because turning stuff like a Grenadin drone into a 2/2 from a 1/1 through a Warcry trigger is not gonna get us very far. It's not that impressive. And yeah, last but not least, we have 4 Bandit Queen, another one of the key cards of the deck, just probably the most powerful aggressive 4-drop in the game, most aggressive for power play in the game. Card is just really powerful. It's basically effectively a 4/2 charge quick draw that gives all your other units +1/+1 charge and quick draw. So even on an empty board, it's a 4 power charge attacker for, yeah, that still leaves a 3/2 body behind, which is not that impressive after the first turn, but a lot of the time there won't be another turn after it. And yeah, we already talked plenty about Sanguar. Easy for the various million synergies and tempo swings that I talked about before. The power base is straightforward, the minimum of 25 power in this deck, because the deck does not need or often even want to play Bandit Queen on turn 4, so it's totally fine if we draw more cheap units instead of that force power for our Bandit Queen, and just keep flooding the board even more, and by the time we hit the force power, everything else that we have drawn before will be units in play and making our Bandit Queen better, so it's not that big of a deal. Since, yeah, if we are not drawing power, we're drawing other things that help us kill our opponent, and if we draw power, we can cast our Bandit Queen. And the deck operates pretty well on 2 to 3 power, due to only having 10 cards that need us to have, that require us to have 3 or more power, and that are not super critical to our game plan until a certain point, basically. And yeah, for Diplomatic Seal, as in every deck that can afford it, like aggressive decks and decks that have low amounts of influence thresholds on their cards. Since the deck basically only needs 1 shadow and 1 fire influence, and eventually a second fire influence among 4 power total drawn. So you're basically gonna use Diplomatic Seal on fire if you have 1 other shadow influence somewhere from another power source. It is actually possible that the powers distribution should be 8 and 5, just because all but Knifejack are fire influence 1-drops. So it's super important to have that fire influence turn 1. Let me change that actually, I think it's actually better. And all we need is 1 shadow influence, and the deck can even occasionally get away by getting the first shadow influence on turn 3. Like turn 2 is usually optimal, but even with some hands you can have it on turn 3, depending on the matchup and draw. And you only ever need 1. Yeah, I think that's everything that is to say about this deck. I think I explained all the cards that I'm playing, and also the cards that I'm not playing and why I'm not playing them over the things that I'm playing. So time to jump into some ranked games. I have climbed a bunch, but I'm not yet Diamond or Masters, but my opponents are plenty of former Masters players from last season still, so we're gonna get competitive games nonetheless. So see you in a moment with the first half of the games video. Stay tuned.